A struggling waitress lost her job feeding 3 orphans every day. Unaware, a billionaire saw it all and changed her life. It had been 1 month since Maria started working at a small diner tucked away on a quiet street corner in New York. She wasn't the type to draw attention, modest, focused, and always polite. Though life hadn't been kind to her, she wore her resilience like a second skin, showing up on time every day and doing her job without complaint. One cold evening, as she was heading home after her shift, something made her stop in her tracks. Huddled under a flickering street lamp were 3 children, barefoot, shivering, and staring hungrily at a nearby bakery window. Their clothes were torn and their eyes hollow. Without hesitation, Maria crossed the street and asked if they were all right. The oldest, a boy no older than 12, nodded but said nothing. The smallest girl, barely 6, clutched her stomach. Maria's heart broke. She used what little she had in her purse to buy them snacks from a corner store. As they ate hungrily on the curb, Maria sat beside them and asked where their parents were. There was silence. Then, the middle child, a quiet boy with wide, wary eyes, murmured, "They're gone. Car accident. No one came for us." Maria's chest tightened. She didn't know what hurt more, the words or the way they said them, like it was something they'd gotten used to. From that night on, Maria made a silent promise. Every evening after her shift, she would bring them food. She never said it out loud. She just did it. At the end of each night, after clearing tables and mopping floors, Maria would wait until the manager stepped into the back office. With swift, practiced hands, she'd pack untouched leftovers, still warm, still good, into 3 paper bags and tuck them into her worn satchel. She wasn't stealing. Not in her mind. The food would have been thrown out anyway. Why waste it when there were hungry mouths just blocks away? She'd slip out into the dark, bustling streets and make her way to the apartment building the children called home. It wasn't much, just a crumbling 3rd-floor unit with flickering lights and peeling paint. But the kids always waited by the window when she arrived. When they saw her, they'd race to the door with laughter and eager hands. "Miss Maria," they'd cheer in unison. She'd ruffle their hair, hand over the meals, and sit with them for a little while. She listened to their stories, schoolyard tales, memories of their parents, silly jokes. In those moments, Maria felt something she hadn't in years: purpose. The children slowly came back to life, and so did she. Unbeknownst to her, across the street, someone was watching. From the backseat of a sleek black car, billionaire Thomas Gray sat in silence. He had seen the moment Maria stopped for the children weeks ago. At first, it was curiosity. But as the days passed, he kept returning, always parking discreetly, always watching as she delivered food and kindness without expectation. In her, he saw something rare, something real, and he couldn't look away. But secrets, no matter how noble, don't stay hidden forever. The morning sun crept lazily over the horizon, casting long shadows across the chrome surfaces inside the diner. Maria had arrived early, as usual. She tied her apron with quiet determination and gave a soft smile to the cook as she passed through the kitchen. But something in the air was different that day, thicker somehow, like a storm waiting to break. Her shift began like any other. Coffee refills, scribbled orders on notepads, the clinking of cutlery, and the occasional burst of laughter from a customer at the corner booth. She worked with grace, seamlessly navigating the clamor. But she could feel eyes on her. Not the usual passing glances or small-town curiosity. This was different. Focused. Sharpened. From the far end of the counter, Darlene watched. Darlene had been at the diner longer than anyone. She prided herself on knowing everything that happened within its 4 walls. Gossip was her currency, and secrets were gold. She'd seen Maria sneaking bags into her purse late at night, whispering excuses to the night staff, brushing it all off like nothing. It wasn't just one time. It had become a pattern, and Darlene, suspicious and territorial, had finally had enough. That afternoon, while Maria cleaned up after the lunch rush, Darlene marched into the manager's office with her lips pressed into a thin line and fire in her eyes. "She's been stealing food," she hissed. "Every night. Slips it into her bag when she thinks no one's watching. I've seen it more than once." The manager, a thin man with a thick mustache and no patience for drama, sighed. "You sure? She's not feeding stray dogs. She's giving it to someone. Kids, maybe. I followed her once. She disappears down 9th and 43rd. You know what kind of people live there." He didn't say much, just nodded grimly and stood up. The next morning, A mandatory staff meeting was called before opening. The room buzzed with confusion. Maria stood beside the coffee machine, her arms folded, sensing something was wrong. The manager didn't waste time. "We need to talk about something serious," he said, glancing directly at her. "We've received a report of employee theft." Heads turned. Maria's heart dropped. He stepped closer. "Maria, it's come to our attention that you've been taking food from the kitchen after hours without authorization. Is that true?" Silence filled the room like smoke. All eyes bore into her. Maria's lips parted, but no words came. She looked down at her hands, stained from dishwater and long shifts. She wasn't a thief. She hadn't taken the food for herself. But how could she explain it in a way that would make them understand? "Yes," she finally said, her voice small. "I took leftovers. They were going to be thrown out." "That's not your decision to make," the manager snapped. "You can't just help yourself to property that doesn't belong to you." "I wasn't," she started, but the heat of humiliation rose too fast. Her voice cracked. "You're dismissed, Maria. Hand in your apron." It was over just like that. No thank you. No warning. Just a swift and cold judgment. She untied her apron slowly, folding it with trembling fingers, and laid it on the counter. No one spoke. Even Darlene didn't smirk. She walked out with her head down, her heart heavy, and her pride in pieces. That evening, the streets of New York felt colder than usual. A late drizzle soaked the pavement, turning the sidewalk slick beneath her feet. Her thin coat clung to her skin, but she didn't notice. She'd spent the last of her money on groceries, a few sandwiches, fruit, and some cookies, carefully packed into a bag tucked under her arm. She didn't know what she was going to do tomorrow. She had no job, no savings, no plan. But none of that mattered right now. The children were waiting. When she knocked on their door, it swung open instantly. "Miss Maria," the little girl squealed, throwing her arms around Maria's waist. "Hey, sunshine," Maria whispered, kneeling to her level. "I brought something for you all." The boy, the oldest, took the bag from her and beamed. "We were getting worried." Maria forced a smile. "I told you I'd come, didn't I?" They sat together on the floor, the apartment dimly lit and barely furnished. The children ate eagerly, their faces full of gratitude. Maria asked about their day, and they took turns talking over one another, about school, about a funny teacher, about a bird they'd seen out the window. She laughed with them, truly laughed, even as a lump formed in her throat. This may be the last time, she thought. As she stood to leave, she lingered a little longer at the door. "You guys take care, all right?" she said gently. "You'll come tomorrow?" the youngest asked. Maria hesitated, then nodded. "Of course." She turned and stepped out into the misty evening. Her shoes splashed against shallow puddles, each step heavier than the last. Rain gathered on her lashes as she walked down the block. She never saw the car. Parked across the street, mostly obscured by the shadows and rainfall, was a black luxury vehicle, sleek, polished, almost invisible against the wet asphalt. Inside, behind tinted glass, Thomas Gray sat silently, his eyes following her every step. He had watched her for weeks now. It had started as a coincidence. A business meeting nearby had ended late, and his driver had taken a shortcut through the Lower East Side. That's when he'd first seen her. A waitress in a worn coat, kneeling to give food to children in the dark. He saw her again 2 nights later, and again the next week. At first, Thomas thought she might be a relative. A kind sister, perhaps, or an older cousin. But as he watched, night after night, it became clear. This was no obligation. She was not bound by blood. She was simply doing it because no one else would. She gave with no audience, no camera, no reward. Thomas Gray was no stranger to the world's cruelty. His billions had been built on numbers, deals, boardrooms filled with hollow smiles. He had seen greed, ambition, and ruthlessness, but rarely had he seen purity. True, selfless compassion. He began to ask questions. His assistant, Ava, ran a discreet background check. Maria had no criminal record. She'd once studied nursing but dropped out after her mother passed. Since then, she had bounced from job to job, scraping by. No family, no connections, and no clue that a billionaire had taken an interest in her. Tonight, when he saw her walk home soaked and silent, clutching an empty grocery bag after being fired for an act of kindness, something in him snapped. She deserved more than this. Those children deserved more. He rolled the window down slightly, letting the rain tap against the glass. His voice was calm as he turned to his driver. "Find out who owns that apartment building," he said. "And tomorrow, schedule a meeting with legal. I have a new project in mind." The driver nodded without a word. Thomas watched Maria disappear around the corner, her silhouette fading into the haze. He leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes. People had always told him that money couldn't fix everything. Maybe they were right, but he had the power to change something. And tonight, that was enough. Thomas Gray didn't usually come to this part of the city. His world was one of glass towers, climate-controlled penthouses, and perfectly timed meetings in executive boardrooms. For a man who could command the stock market with a whisper, the potholes and flickering streetlights of East 43rd Street might as well have been another planet. And yet, here he was. Again, the leather interior of the car cradled him in comfort, but his eyes stayed fixed on the sidewalk through the rain-speckled window. The world outside was raw and indifferent. More honest than anything he experienced in business. He hadn't meant to stop the first time. It was late, and grief had driven him out of his building like a ghost, wandering, restless, looking for something he couldn't name. His driver took a wrong turn near the edge of Harlem, and that's when he saw her. A woman in a waitress uniform, walking quickly beneath the dim glow of a street lamp. Her steps had urgency, but not fear. Purpose. She turned a corner. He followed. She disappeared into a decaying apartment complex, re-emerging 10 minutes later, lighter bag, warmer smile. Waiting at the door had been 3 children, thin, wide-eyed, and grinning at her like she was a miracle. Something shifted in Thomas Gray that night. He came back the next day, and the day after that. Always in the shadows. Always watching. The flashbacks flickered through his mind like a montage. Maria kneeling to tie the youngest child's shoelace. Maria wiping raindrops from the oldest boy's hair. Maria laughing, not for anyone else, just for them. It wasn't performative. It wasn't charity. It was care, quiet, unshakable care. At first, he told himself it was curiosity. Something pure and unfamiliar in a world so stained with self-interest. But it had grown into something else. Something deeper. He admired her. Not because she was perfect. Her shoes were worn, her coat threadbare, her own exhaustion visible in the sag of her shoulders. He admired her because of all of that. She gave even when she had little. In her, he saw what the world pretended to have but rarely showed: integrity. One afternoon, in his sleek corner office overlooking Manhattan, he spoke her name aloud for the first time. "Maria Alvarez," he said quietly, watching the city pulse below. His assistant, Ava, glanced up from her tablet. "Should I look into her?" He nodded. Quietly. "I don't want her harassed." Ava, precise and tactful as always, returned 2 days later with a thin file. "She's clean," she reported. "No record. No family to speak of. Lost her mother 2 years ago. Dropped out of nursing school. Works odd jobs. Lived in 3 apartments in the last year. This last one, where the children are, has had complaints about overcrowding, but no interventions. And the kids?" Ava flipped the page. "Orphaned. Parents died in a car crash 7 months ago. No surviving relatives. They slipped through the system somehow, living on their own. Illegally, technically." Thomas ran his hand across his jaw. "She feeds them. Every night. She got fired 2 days ago from the diner for taking leftovers. Management called it theft." He leaned back in his chair, eyes drifting toward the horizon. "She never asked for anything," he murmured. "Never told anyone. She just did it." Ava hesitated. "Do you want to send money? A trust, maybe?" "No," he said, shaking his head. "She doesn't need a donation. That would insult what she's built. I want to help her stand taller, not feel smaller." He stood and walked to the window. The city looked different now, less steel, more soul. "I want her to know someone saw her," he said. That night, he returned to the car. It was colder now, and the rain had turned to mist. He didn't tell his driver where they were going. He didn't have to. They both knew the route by heart. Maria's silhouette came into view through the haze. She walked slower now, her shoulders stooped, but still carried the same bag in her arms, tonight filled with food she'd bought herself. No paycheck. No job. Still giving. Thomas's chest tightened. He remembered the long hours after his own loss, how the mansion echoed with silence, how condolences felt rehearsed and empty. Money didn't insulate him from heartbreak. It only left him more isolated. His world hadn't stopped to grieve, and no one had brought him comfort in brown paper bags. She had no idea someone had been watching, that her small act of kindness had become his sanctuary. It was time. The next morning, Thomas sat across from Ava again. But this time, there was purpose behind his instructions. Find out who owns the building, he said. I want to secure the children's housing. No eviction threats. No surprise inspections. Ava nodded, typing quickly. Contact a social worker. One I trust. I want those children protected. Properly enrolled in school. Health checks. Everything. Yes, sir. And Maria? He asked, softer now. She doesn't need a handout. She needs an opportunity. Something worthy of her. Ava tilted her head. What are you thinking? Thomas smiled faintly. I'm thinking she should never have to beg for scraps to feed children ever again. As he looked out over the city, his reflection stared back from the glass. A man who had everything, finding meaning not in profits, but in a waitress with tired eyes and a heart too big for her own good. The world had its eyes on power and spectacle. His were on Maria, and that made all the difference. The morning sun pushed shyly through the cracks of the weathered blinds in Maria's tiny apartment. The kettle whistled on the stove, a thin trail of steam curling into the air like a question mark over a day that held no answers. Maria sat at the rickety kitchen table, sipping weak coffee from a chipped mug. Her eyes, rimmed with exhaustion, scanned the classifieds. Several job listings were already circled in red pen, though her confidence in them was paper-thin. Dishwasher, night clerk, part-time cleaner, all underpaid, all unlikely to cover the rent, let alone food for herself and the children. The pile of bills on the counter had grown overnight: electric, rent, and overdue medical notice. Her stomach tightened at the sight of them. Still, she forced herself to look away and turned toward the bedroom where the children slept. She couldn't let them see fear on her face. They had already seen too much of it in their short lives. Then the phone rang. It startled her, not just because it was early, but because almost no one ever called. She picked it up cautiously. Hello? A calm, professional voice answered. Good morning. May I speak with Maria Alvarez? This is she. This is Lillian from Gray Industries. Mr. Thomas Gray would like to meet you for an interview. Today at noon, if you're available. Maria blinked. The name dropped into the room like a stone into a still pond. Gray Industries? She repeated, uncertain if she'd heard correctly. I think you might have the wrong number. I didn't apply there. No mistake, ma'am. Mr. Gray has personally requested your presence. We'll email you the address. A car will arrive to pick you up at 11:30. The line went dead before Maria could protest. By 11:30, she was pacing by the curb outside her apartment, wearing her cleanest blouse and an old navy skirt that barely fit anymore. Her nerves buzzed beneath her skin like static. When a sleek black sedan rolled up and a driver stepped out, tipping his hat, she felt like she was walking into someone else's story. The car moved silently through the city, and before long, glass towers surrounded them like monuments to wealth and ambition. The vehicle stopped in front of a skyscraper etched with a minimalist G logo, Gray Industries. She hesitated on the sidewalk, staring up, daunted. Inside, the lobby gleamed with marble and chrome. People in tailored suits floated past her, phones to their ears, shoes tapping crisply against the polished floors. She hugged her purse to her chest, painfully aware of every fray in her outfit. A receptionist greeted her warmly, as if she belonged, and led her to a private elevator. The ride was quiet, each ascending floor adding weight to her chest. When the doors finally opened, she stepped into a room that overlooked all of Manhattan. Floor-to-ceiling windows spilled light over a sleek office lined with bookshelves and a single desk at the far end. There, waiting with a calm smile, was Thomas Gray himself. Maria froze. He was younger than she expected, early 40s, perhaps. Sharp suit, warm eyes, and a presence that was powerful without being intimidating. Ms. Alvarez, he said, rising and extending his hand. Thank you for coming. She shook it tentatively, her words tangled in her throat. I don't understand. Why am I here? Thomas gestured to a pair of chairs by the window. Please, sit. She did, clutching her bag like armor. He sat opposite her, folding his hands. I'll get straight to it. I know about the children. I know what you've been doing for them. I know about your dismissal from the diner. Her heart thudded in panic. I wasn't stealing, she said quickly. They were just leftovers. They were going to throw them away. I know, he said gently, cutting through her fear. And I'm not here to scold you, Maria. I'm here to thank you. Her breath caught. I've seen you, he continued. Not just recently. I've watched you for weeks. Your commitment, your kindness, your strength. You didn't do it for recognition. You didn't expect praise. But what you did, it mattered. Maria's confusion deepened. Why would someone like you care? He leaned forward slightly. Because I've lost people too. I know what it's like to feel helpless. But I also know how rare it is to find someone who does something when they see pain. You acted. You didn't wait for a savior. You became one. Maria looked down at her lap, struggling to absorb the weight of his words. I want to offer you a job, he said. A real one. A full-time executive assistant role at Gray Industries. It comes with full benefits, housing, health care, and more. She blinked. I'm not qualified for something like that. Thomas smiled. You're more than qualified. Skills can be taught. Integrity can't. And I need someone around me who sees the world the way you do. Silence fell between them, but it wasn't awkward. It was awe. I don't understand, she whispered. Why would you do this for me? Thomas stood and walked to the window, hands in his pockets. Because you reminded me that there's still good in the world. And I believe that when we find goodness, we should lift it, not just applaud from afar. He turned to face her. I believe in rewarding true goodness. Tears filled Maria's eyes, but she blinked them back. Her hands trembled in her lap, hope and disbelief warring inside her. I don't know what to say, she said finally. Say yes, he replied, with a smile. And let's change some lives, starting with yours. The transition from Maria's old life to her new one was not a single moment, but a quiet accumulation of days, each one peeling away her doubt, one layer at a time. The first few weeks were a blur of learning. Every morning, she stepped into Gray Industries' gleaming headquarters, her heart racing, wondering when someone would realize she didn't belong there. But no one did. They treated her like she'd always been part of the team. Her office was small but sleek, tucked away in the corner of the floor. Her desk gleamed with fresh supplies, an untouched world of possibilities waiting to be discovered. And discover she did. Her work ethic, always sharp but previously constrained by circumstances, now thrived under Thomas's mentorship. He guided her through board meetings with a patient hand, showing her the intricacies of business, teaching her the art of negotiation, and how to speak with the confidence that came from understanding both the power of her words and the responsibility they carried. Every day, she grew more competent, more comfortable in the corporate world. She no longer felt like an imposter. Her hands, once uncertain as they clutched crumpled papers and hand-me-down notebooks, now typed with precision on her sleek laptop. Her voice, once soft with hesitation, now rang clear as she spoke up in meetings. Her growth was a testament to both her relentless drive and Thomas's unwavering belief in her potential. Days turned into weeks, and Maria's transformation was clear to everyone around her. She was no longer the shy, exhausted woman who barely managed to make ends meet. She had become a force in her own right, respected, confident, and thriving. Her relationship with Thomas deepened, not just as a mentor and mentee, but as something more unspoken, like two people who had finally found common ground in a world that often overlooked their quiet strength. But while Maria's world was expanding, another was quietly unfolding just outside her view. Thomas found himself drawn to the children more than he expected. The three orphans had become part of the fabric of his life, even if Maria didn't know it. He'd visited them a few times, bringing small gifts at first, new clothes, books, toys. But it wasn't just about the material. It was about being there, watching their faces light up as they saw him approach the doorstep, his presence becoming a constant they could rely on. He played with them, listened to their stories, their laughter echoing in the worn apartment as if it were the most sacred sound in the world. The resilience in their eyes reminded him of his own younger self, so often overlooked, forced to fend for himself. In them, he saw a reflection of everything he had once been, everything he wished had been different. They were tough. They had survived the worst, yet still held on to their hope. There was something magnetic about their spirits, something impossible to ignore. One evening, as the rain tapped gently against the windows of the small apartment, Thomas sat with the children around the kitchen table, his shirt sleeves rolled up as he helped them with their homework. He listened to them talk about their day, their fears, and their dreams. He couldn't help but smile at their innocence, at the way they still held on to joy despite the tragedies they'd faced. It made him wonder how different things could have been for them, if only they had the same opportunities that others took for granted. That night, as he lay in bed, the decision solidified in his mind. He had to act. He called his lawyer the next morning. Meanwhile, Maria, fully immersed in her new role, was still unaware of the quiet transformations taking place around her. She threw herself into her work, thinking about the children only when she had a free moment, knowing they were safe, fed, and happy for the time being. Her thoughts would sometimes drift to them at the end of the day, but her new job was consuming in the best way. She'd worked harder than ever before, and every day, she grew more confident in her own skin. One morning, she received a letter at work, the envelope embossed with an official seal. She opened it, her brow furrowing in confusion as she read. It was a formal letter from Gray Industries, but the contents weren't about business. It was an official notice that the children she had helped for so long, whom she thought were still struggling to survive, had been legally adopted by none other than Thomas Gray. Maria blinked, staring at the letter as if it was some kind of mistake. She hadn't known Thomas was planning this, hadn't known that he was working behind the scenes to give them a future. But as she sat in her office, the full weight of it hit her like a wave. He had seen their worth, their resilience, and he had acted in a way she never could have imagined. The adoption was a quiet affair, done with precision and respect. The children were placed into a new home, one with plenty of space, comfort, and love. Every need was met, but not with pity. They were cared for, yes, but more importantly, they were seen, truly seen, for who they were. And as their new father, Thomas took it upon himself to ensure that nothing would ever take them from him again. A few weeks later, Thomas invited Maria to dinner at his home. It was not some lavish, formal gathering, but a quiet evening, just the two of them. As they ate, he casually mentioned the children. "They're doing well," he said, a slight smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Better than they've ever been, actually. They're thriving. And I wanted you to know that I've taken care of everything." Maria blinked, unsure of what he was talking about, but Thomas continued before she could ask. "I adopted them. They're my kids now." Maria's fork clattered gently against her plate. "What? You did?" He nodded, his expression earnest. "I couldn't let them fall through the cracks. And you gave them something no one else did. You gave them a chance. I wanted to make sure they had that and more." Maria's chest tightened, emotions swirling through her. She felt a lump form in her throat as she struggled to find words. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked softly. Thomas leaned back, meeting her eyes with that quiet confidence she had come to trust. "I didn't want you to worry. You've got a lot on your plate, Maria. I just wanted you to focus on your future. You earned it." For a moment, all Maria could do was sit there in stunned silence, her heart full and brimming with gratitude. She had given so much of herself, never asking for anything in return. But now, as she looked at Thomas, her mentor, her friend, she realized that sometimes life has a way of returning the love you've given tenfold. And for the first time in a long while, she believed it. She believed that she wasn't just surviving. She was thriving. Maria stood at the front door of Thomas's estate, adjusting the hem of her simple dress as the butler greeted her with a warm smile. She had been to his office countless times, but this grand home nestled in the hills, was an entirely different world. The towering columns, the lush gardens that seemed to stretch endlessly, and the soft glow of light spilling from the windows gave it the air of a place she had no right to enter. Yet here she was, invited to dinner by the man who had given her more than she could have ever imagined. She entered the vast foyer, her breath catching in her throat as she looked around. The walls were adorned with art that looked far too expensive to touch, and the floors gleamed with polished wood that echoed with every step. It felt like walking through a dream. "Maria, welcome." Thomas's voice broke through her awe, and she turned to see him standing at the foot of a grand staircase, looking every bit the billionaire he was. But his smile, warm and genuine, made the whole world feel smaller, more familiar. "Thank you for inviting me," she said, her voice soft as she adjusted her purse nervously. "Come in," he said, offering her his arm. "Dinner is ready, and there's a surprise waiting for you." Maria followed him into the dining room, her heart thumping with curiosity. The room was elegant, but not overpowering. Soft golden light bathed the large wooden table set with crystal glasses and fine china. She could already smell the meal, something rich, savory, a promise of luxury. But as she stepped into the room, something else caught her attention, a burst of laughter, familiar and unmistakable. And there they were, the three children. The ones she had given everything for, the ones she had fed, cared for, loved when no one else had. They were sitting at the table, smiling and laughing, dressed in fresh clothes, their faces brighter and healthier than she had ever seen them. For a moment, Maria froze. She felt like she had walked into someone else's life, into a scene that couldn't possibly be real. "Maria," Thomas said gently, his voice filled with warmth, "I'd like you to meet my children." The words hung in the air, suspended in disbelief. Maria's chest tightened, and she took a step forward, as if her feet couldn't move fast enough to reach them. Her eyes welled up with tears as she looked at the three faces that had haunted her every night. "Wait, you," her voice faltered. She turned to Thomas, her heart racing. "You adopted them?" Thomas nodded, a smile of pride on his face. "I did, and they insisted that you be part of their lives forever." Tears spilled down Maria's cheeks, and without thinking, she crossed the room, kneeling down beside the children. They rushed to her, their small arms wrapping around her tightly, as if they had always known that this moment was meant to be. She hugged them back, holding them close, overwhelmed with emotion she couldn't put into words. How could she ever have known that all her quiet acts of love would lead to this? To them. To this moment of pure, untainted joy. Thomas watched the scene unfold, his gaze steady but soft, as though witnessing something profound. He approached them slowly, the light from the chandelier casting a golden glow over everything. "You gave them love when they had nothing," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "Now they have everything, and so do you." Maria looked up at him, her heart full, her chest tight with gratitude and disbelief. She had no words. No words for the years of hardship, the quiet struggles, the sacrifice. And now, it all seemed to have led her here, to this table, to this family. The children pulled away from her just enough to look into her eyes, their faces glowing with happiness. "We're a family now," the eldest, Sophia, said with the most innocent certainty. "Yes," Maria whispered, her voice shaky with emotion. "We are." Thomas stepped forward, placing his hand gently on her shoulder. "I thought you should know. This was always meant to be. You were the one who taught me that there's nothing more powerful than love. And that's what you've given them, everything." The room seemed to glow with warmth, filled with the sound of laughter and the soft clink of silverware. Maria, for the first time in a long time, felt a peace she hadn't known she was searching for. They sat down together, the four of them, and for the first time, Maria truly understood the depth of what Thomas had done. It wasn't just about money or homes or things. It was about making sure the children knew love, knew family, and knew they would never be alone again. As the evening unfolded, Maria looked around at her new family, her heart swelling with gratitude. The life she had always imagined, the one she had dreamed of for so long, was unfolding right before her eyes. And with a soft laugh, she realized something. This was just the beginning. It had been several months since Maria's life had changed. Each morning, she woke not to the hum of stress or the weight of uncertainty, but to the quiet rhythm of stability. The apartment was filled with warmth and laughter now, not just from her, but from three growing children whose eyes no longer held fear, only hope. Sophia, the oldest, had blossomed in school. Once shy and withdrawn, she now raised her hand with confidence, answering questions with a spark that made her teachers smile. Max, always restless, had discovered a love for soccer. His energy was no longer scattered in survival, it had direction. And Lily, the youngest, found joy in art. Her drawings now lined the hallway of their home, full of color, life, and imagination. Maria often watched them in quiet moments, coffee in hand, marveling at how far they'd come from a cracked apartment with cold floors and empty cupboards to this life of comfort and peace. She had been their bridge. And yet, as she often told herself, they had saved her too. She had grown, not just in circumstance, but in strength. At Gray Industries, Maria had stepped into a new world, professional meetings, confident decisions, and earned respect. There were days she still doubted herself, but Thomas's calm faith in her always brought her back. He saw something in her before she saw it in herself. And now, she walked with her head held higher than ever before. And Thomas? He was no longer the reserved billionaire glimpsed from afar. He had changed too, becoming a steady, loving presence in the children's lives. What began as distant visits had turned into bedtime stories, soccer games, and quiet talks over meals. The cold edges he had once worn like armor had softened. He smiled more now. He laughed, and when he looked at the children, there was something unmistakable in his eyes, belonging. They all sat together now each evening, Maria, Thomas, and the children, sharing dinner not out of duty, but joy. Conversations flowed naturally. Sometimes silly, sometimes heartfelt, always full of life. It wasn't perfect. There were messes, missed homework, and days when everything felt a little too much. But it was real, and it was theirs. Maria often thought back to that first night. The leftovers, the children's hungry eyes, the choice to give what little she had. She hadn't known anyone was watching. She hadn't expected anything in return. She did it because it was right. Because kindness, to her, wasn't an act, it was instinct. And yet, that single choice had set everything in motion. In quiet moments, she would whisper a thank you to the universe. Not for the money, or the job, or the house, but for the path that kindness had opened. For the unexpected family that had found her. Now, as she tucked Lily into bed, helped Sophia with homework, and high-fived Max after a winning goal, she knew her life had come full circle. What she had given in love, she had received back 100-fold. And in that truth, there was peace. She stood on the porch one evening, the sun dipping below the horizon, a soft breeze brushing her cheek. Behind her, laughter echoed from the kitchen, Thomas and the kids, preparing dessert. Maria smiled. The smallest acts of kindness, she thought, echo louder than we know. And she stepped back inside, into the warmth of the life she never saw coming, but had always, in her heart, been meant to live. If you enjoyed this heartfelt story of Maria, Thomas Gray, and the three incredible children, Sophia, Max, and little Lily, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories just like this one. We'd love to hear what you think. What are your thoughts on how everything turned out for Maria and the children? Did Thomas's decision to step into their lives move you? How did this journey of kindness and second chances make you feel? Drop your comments below and let us know. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this story? Be honest. We want to keep improving and bringing you the best. Also, tell us where you're watching from at your city or country. We love seeing how far these stories reach around the world. Thank you for spending your time with us. We'll see you in the next one.